Welcome to another conversation in People in Fundraising. This podcast features interviews with nonprofit professionals who discuss their career journeys, lessons learned, and enthusiasm for working in fundraising. And here is your host, the founder of People in Fundraising, Tim Wilson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another conversation in the People in Fundraising podcast series, which was launched almost 3 years ago. And today is Friday, December 13th, 2024, Friday the 13th. And I'm very excited today to welcome my first guest from Kentucky. His name is Ben Mohler. And good afternoon, Ben. How are you?
I'm very good, Tim. Thanks for having me. I'm Ben Mohler from GivingThree. I'm the chief executive of a consulting firm located in Kentucky and serving organizations nationally.
Awesome. That's great lead in. I'm excited to hear how you started GivingThree. And as I did my sort of prospect research ahead of time, you've had a very varied professional career and an extensive volunteer career as well. So love to hear what you have to share about those topics as we go forward in our conversation today. As we always do, Ben, first question for each guest is for you to tell us in a few minutes how you entered the fundraising profession, please.
Sure. So I'm probably not like most in the profession. Most folks say they fell into it by accident, whatever. But
Yes.
Actually, fundraising was my first full-time job out of college.
Awesome.
So, I had other jobs before that, contract work, internships and whatnot, but it was my first full-time job out of college.
All right.
And I guess I did fall into it kind of accidentally. In college, I liked computers and engineering. I thought engineering would be my field of study. But as I got into that, I realized I didn't like being, in a lab or in front of a computer all the time. Sure. I enjoyed being around people, and engineers that's not really what they're known for, interacting with people. So, so I, near the end of my career, I was like finishing up an internship and some contract work for a technical company. I reached out to the vice president, or actually the associate dean for development for an engineering college. Okay. And said, "Hey, I'm looking for a job. I'm not really sure what I want to do." And they said, "Well, why don't I talk with you and figure out, and I can help connect you," because they knew engineering firms and they were willing to make introductions. And in that conversation, he basically said, "You remind me a lot of myself at your age." Okay. Where you have a lot of interests, a lot of skills, a lot of abilities. And then he said, "Would you ever consider fundraising?"
Wow.
So I said I was open to it. And so he's like, "Well, we have a few openings and I can, recommend you apply for a role, and, we'll see how you do in the official process." So that was how I got my first job, was just by someone saying, "Hey, I think you would be good at this work."
That's awesome. I love that someone else saw skills, abilities in you and thought, hey, this might be a good avenue for you.
Yeah. And I was very fortunate. It was University of Texas at Austin. So I was fortunate that I was able to go and work for an organization that actually was doing fundraising the right way and was well staffed, well resourced, and a boss that actually allowed me, room to learn and grow.
Awesome. And how long were you in that role, or how long were you at UT Austin before you?
Yeah, I was there about almost 5 years. So we measure time differently in Texas. I was there from Ricky Williams to Vince Young.
Okay.
So the Mac Brown years. And it was during the We're Texas campaign. And my first job was basically to learn about the case for support and help translate the case for support into powerful messages for our corporate donors and our foundation donors. So I was basically doing, ground up work on learning how to communicate our mission to donors that we had not really worked with to that point within the campaign. So,
interesting.
For about 5 years.
What a time for you to be starting your career at, as you mentioned, a well-resourced institution in a campaign. I just imagine that must have been, a wealth of knowledge transfer to you starting out in your career in fundraising.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It allowed me the room to like, okay, most fundraisers, don't learn about the case for support and how to translate that into case statements for specific audiences
Yeah.
until later in the career. And I got to, right off the bat. So,
Yeah, that's awesome. And where did you go, Ben, from UT Austin, please?
so UT Austin, I was there. I did communications, I did corporate and foundation relations, and then I did alumni relations. And it was more not necessarily just alumni programming, but it was doing things that actually engaged alumni in the mission. So it
Oh,
was at the time it was kind of a new idea of alumni engagement, but it was early 2000s, so it was before kind of the alumni engagement was a thing.
sure.
It, and then after that, I was, it was really kind of like pre-qualifying folks to engage in philanthropic work. And kind of my mentor there, the associate dean, said, I think you have a future in this. I think the next field for you or next area is major gifts and annual fund. And you need to figure out those things if you're going to stay in this field.
Mhm.
And he conveyed that I could do that, but there weren't any openings, and he didn't know when there would be openings.
Yeah.
So, just encouraged me to either stick with what I was doing or to be open to other things. And so that's when I moved to a role at my alma mater, Cedarville University,
Oh, okay.
to do basically annual fund, lead annual work, and some of the like moving into major gift work.
Okay.
So yeah. So
If you
basically,
could,
so I would get the full suite of experience of the sector.
that's great. If you could talk about what it was like for you to go back to your alma mater and to be, on this track of expanding your skill set with major and annual giving, please.
It was hard because when you're a student, like you are in a different place. You're loving everything. You love your faculty. You love like the whole student experience.
Sure.
And when you're in staff, like you start to see all the dysfunction. You start to see, and like me, I had a young looking face, and I was only 5 years or so removed from being an undergraduate.
Yeah.
And so the faculty I was working with didn't always remember that I was not a student. Like, they still thought of me as a student. So there were
Oh,
challenges there
yeah.
of, and especially I think a lot of fundraisers have this problem when they're dealing with faculty. Like, they, faculty are, they have their doctorates and they're experts in the field, and they, not everyone respects fundraising as being an actual profession. They think of
Yeah.
it as just like, you're out there asking for money and, long arms, deep pockets sort of thing.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think it was a challenging time because there was a lot of that of like, who is this kid telling me how we do the stuff?
Yeah.
And
Mm.
I in fact knew how to do the stuff.
Right.
So it was challenging those ways, but it was a good time to kind of learn how to navigate on the alumni side, because that was the internal piece, but the external was much easier because I got to do visits and got to develop strategies, develop a development plan,
Yeah.
and then work that plan. And so in those ways, it was rewarding to be able to be successful outside the organization, despite the challenges internally with, just culture and the things that you would have going back to, where you were just not long ago.
Right. Well, as a follow-up, as you mentioned, you were now on the staff, but it wasn't that long ago that you were a student. Did you have visits with alumni and prospects that graduated with or around you? And if you
Oh
did,
yeah.
what was that like?
Yeah, I did. Because I was trying to start, like I was doing the lead annual program, and so I was engaging with alumni that had been giving and trying to get them into the next tier of support.
Yeah.
And folks that, I mean, they're folks that, having been a student, I was aware of the ones that had the experience, so to speak. You see
Yeah.
alumni that there's those that go and just are getting the degree to go to work, and there's others that are like truly immersed in the college experience. And so
Definitely. Yeah.
so I kind of had a sense of who those were,
Yeah.
And so connecting with them, and it was fun. I didn't feel like I was like going to ask my friends for money,
Hmm.
but really like I was, they had a good experience, and what I was doing was giving them an opportunity to really reinvest in the experience and help others have something similar. So it was,
Yeah.
you know I didn't mind it. I liked it, and it was fun to be able to go and interact with basically my peers.
Totally. Yeah.
So yeah, it was fun, and those visits were different. Like you think about donor visits, what those look like, and it was like going to a baseball game, like
Mm.
meeting for hot dogs and watching the game, and like having a discussion about the university and its needs, and where they might fit in that whole mix. And and that was very different than you might have with an older donor or something like that.
Sure. Yeah. Or someone that may have just had that sort of that, you know, more of a transactional experience. I'm going here for the degree and then I'm moving on. And
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. Huh. Well, I appreciate that background and how you got into the field, both at UT Austin and then at your alma mater, Cedarville. I'd love to pivot and have you talk about first your company, as you mentioned, the founder and CEO of GivingThree. So talk about what GivingThree does and where people can find more information about it, please.
Yeah.
And then if you can tell us, what made you decide to launch this company about 16 years ago?
Yeah, so I launched it 16 years ago when I was in a role where I was not getting the professional development that I needed.
Okay.
I was being given, I think the rule was that we were allowed to attend one conference every other year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Um, and I was at a place where going to a conference was not providing me the level of insight or learning that I really needed.
Yeah.
Because I was you probably tell I'm one that kind of pushes myself a bit.
Yes.
And so I found that the way that I learned the best was either by doing things hands on or to have to teach others.
Yeah.
Because if you have to teach someone else, then you have to learn it at a much deeper level. Because it's not just about knowing it well enough to do it, but knowing it well enough to be able to explain it to someone else so they can do it.
Absolutely.
So I started the company in 2008, and I named it GivingThree. The idea was that my focus was not on fundraising, but on all aspects of the philanthropic process. So time, talent, and treasure. So that's where the
Yeah.
three comes from.
Oh, neat.
And so I did it so I could start doing pro bono projects. And if I had business expenses for, even if pro bono, you have mileage and other things, that those were then write-offs. Those were I was able
Yeah.
to basically effectively, this is before the tax code change, but I was able to document the expenses I was incurring doing these projects pro bono, and then eventually paid projects.
Mm.
That I was able to learn by doing things. I was able to learn by teaching things.
Yeah.
So it was a way, is really a vehicle for me to do professional development that was kind of a little more novel than just going to a conference, less than passive. It was an active method of learning and experiencing.
Absolutely. That is so neat. Like you took, I mean, you worked at UT Austin, Longhorns. You took the bull by the horns there. I liked how you phrased it as it wasn't a passive learning experience. You're like actively looking for how you could make further progress.
Yeah, and it was largely because I mean at the time this was when the real estate bubble had burst. There was like an
Yeah.
economic there's banking issues. This is like around 2008. You think about what was going on in the world,
Oh yeah.
and a lot of organizations were like saying, okay, we can't do fundraising, we got to step back, our endowments were taking a hit, we were asking for gifts to fund underwater endowments, and it's just a whole different environment.
Yeah.
And I felt like it wasn't a time to be on my heels. It was time to actually be out. And I felt like when there was greater need, people would be more generous. And so
Yeah.
I took an opposite perspective,
Yeah.
and I worked on developing an actual special campaign for an academic research center.
Oh, okay.
And so like while the university was like, we're going to wait until the economy improves, I was like, I'm gonna not wait for anything. I'm gonna actually.
Yes.
But if you're looking to, do a campaign, you gotta, and you've never done a campaign, or at least not planned one from, soup to nuts.
Yeah.
You gotta, you know, actually learn how to do it. And so that was my method, was okay, by doing the having a firm, I can learn all the pieces and then put the pieces together and then, apply it at work.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. When did you feel like you were not yourself, because you've had a breadth of experience already, but when did you feel that GivingThree was hitting its stride, um, as an entity, please?
I mean, I was being asked to speak at undergraduate and graduate programs, and and when I did that, like, they introduced me as, the president and founder of GivingThree, rather than my title of the organization where I worked full time.
Okay.
And so
Yeah.
it's things like that, where it was my professional identity was less about, where I was working as a fundraiser, and more about where I was working as a person that was learning and growing and helping others. And so I
Mm.
think that was like 2013 or 14
Okay.
was the time frame where it became less of like just like a professional development, you know, entity, to
Yeah.
becoming something a little more than that.
Oh, neat. Neat. And where can people go to find more information, Ben, about
Yeah.
GivingThree, please?
So GivingThree website is givingthree.com. Spelled out GIVINGTHREE.com. And the services provided, I'm actually doing a lot more executive coaching, executive counsel.
Oh, interesting.
So you think about, people talk about burnout and that sort of
Yeah.
thing in the sector, and I'm seeing it a lot. I'm having folks reach out, and so I'm doing a lot of like just helping people navigate,
Mm.
where they're at, either toxic leadership or bad boards, or, people
Yeah.
that are maybe new to roles in terms of management, and, how to navigate coaching a team, managing a team. So I
Yeah.
do a lot of that, fundraising, do change management.
Okay.
Um, so kind of a variance of things. And I also do this thing where there's a basically, you've heard of the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, the
I have.
FEP.
Yeah.
So I have a product that basically does a 10-year look back of performance, and it basically provides all the analytics to help fundraising organizations to be able to identify trends, but also opportunities, and build strategies. So, some
Cool.
things they're not really all related, but in my mind, they all relate.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And just, without giving away names, but just, broadly, are you looking at higher ed, arts, culture, museums? Like, what's your client base, please?
Colleges, universities. So I've done stuff for like R1s. I've done
Okay.
stuff for community colleges,
Yeah.
small regional, membership organizations, organizations with related foundations, community foundations, social services organizations. Really, it's a wide variety of things.
That's awesome.
I guess the main thread is that they have to want to be better and are
Hmm.
willing to do the long view approach to getting better.
Okay.
So I don't accept clients that it's clear that they're just looking for a quick fix, or, a band-aid, or, like a secret potion or a secret pill. Like,
Right.
that's not my
Yeah.
jam.
So on that note, if you're comfortable sharing it, what are some things that are flags for you when you get approached by a prospective client, and it is an institution or an entity where you're like, they need a longer term commitment to change, but what they're telling me is the opposite.
Yeah, when they focus on the amount spent,
Okay.
like the cost, like if they're focused on what are your rates, what's your hourly rate.
Yeah.
Because if the goal is to spend the least amount of money, then I'm not the right person.
Yeah.
But if the goal is to get to a solution, and there, I mean, regardless of money, because you can spend a lot of money in a short time frame or a long time frame, or you spend a little amount of money short time frame or a long time frame. But
Yeah.
my goal is on outcomes, not on how much you spend. So if they're focused on, you pitched a certain rate, can we get this, can we cut it in half? I'm like, we can, but then it's going to be, half of the scope. So I mean, we can adjust the scope and adjust the timeline, but
Yeah.
if you're looking to spend the least amount of money, and that's usually the biggest red flag, is if they're focused on a dollar amount, then it's probably
Yeah.
not the best fit.
Okay.
Yeah,
And are your clients mostly US based, Canada, international?
yeah, all US based. Yes.
Okay. Terrific. Terrific. So what excites you, and this is not in the questionnaire, but I love, hearing more about this. Um, 16 years in operation, what are you excited about for the future of your company and the direction of it, please?
Um, the thing that I am most focused on is how do I make it so that my company is not focused on exchanging my time for money.
Oh,
So I'm looking on how do I scale things, and so like I'm working on actual book products
okay.
where if I have someone that comes to me and says we really need help with the board, but they don't want to invest either the time or the money to do the thing they need to do, they could buy a book. I have a book and some resources, and they can figure out how to do it themselves.
Oh, neat.
And it may not be as fast, but it will definitely be a lot less expensive.
Yeah.
And so I'm working on things like that where I can serve a wider range of clients by not having just one approach.
I see. Yeah.
So that sort of thing, but very focused on boards and leadership because I think that a lot of the burnout and the trends we're seeing in terms of donor retention are because of leadership being forced to focus on bottom line current results, not on long-term sustainability
Absolutely.
and retention of donors.
Yeah.
So I focus on leadership, focus on boards, me personally, I'm focused on how do I scale it so that I am not, I have broader impact.
Yeah.
So I can, books, worksheets, things that are able to, and then even like community foundations. I did something recently where a community foundation brought me in to do a workshop, and I was doing the workshop for many different organizations of different sizes,
Uh-huh.
and it was a capacity building thing where I was teaching them the fundamentals. And it was a much better use of my time than to do, a workshop where folks don't really, they're just there for professional development credits because they need them, not because they
Right.
really actually need to learn how to, build capacity for their work.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Interesting.
So those are things is things that scale, and that's part of the giving report that I talked about. It's a product that is scalable, that it costs a very affordable amount, that if you hired a researcher or a data scientist to do, it would cost like probably 10 times as much.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that rundown of Giving
Yeah.
Three and telling our audience where they can find more information and what your services are. Um, I think you used or I used a phrase, one of us used a phrase like a broad base of activities. So that gets to my next question about you, Ben, because you
Yeah.
are on the board of AFP Global.
Yeah.
And as I was doing my research ahead of time, um, your bio on the AFP Global website notes that you served as a member of the Texas State Guard 401st Air Support Group of
Hmm.
the 4th Air Wing. And during your service, you received several commendations, including those in recognition of honorable service during relief operations for both Hurricanes Katrina and Rita.
Yeah.
What stands out to you about those relief operations? And I'm just curious, about that facet of your life
Yeah.
experience.
So the thing that stands out most is typically fundraisers where we're somewhat removed from the mission. Like we see it, we can experience, we can see, if you're in higher ed, you can see the classroom, you can see the teaching.
Yeah,
If you're in healthcare, you can see, the treatment, you can see the doctors, you can see, that whole patient experience.
yeah,
If you're in health services, I mean, unless you're a small agency where like, one person does everything,
right.
but most fundraisers are somewhat removed from the mission.
Hmm.
And so my experience with the Texas State Guard and being in the Air Force, and the experience with Katrina and Rita was that, I was able to see the face of humanity more directly.
Yeah.
I was able to see the need. I was able to see the despair.
Mm.
I think when you're a fundraiser, maybe you may see it, but you may be a little bit removed from it.
Yeah.
And so that work had me really up close and personal with,
Mm.
the worst of tragedies, to be able to, um, like we'd have folks that were coming to the shelter, and we were seeing parents that were not connected with their kids, looking for their kids. We
Oh,
had
goodness.
kids that were disconnected from their parents.
Mm.
A bulletin board of pictures and notes of people trying to reconnect. And it could have been that they had passed away or just got somehow separated.
Oh,
So seeing that firsthand was hard.
sure.
And but then also seeing the how philanthropy can rise to meet those needs.
Mm.
So we had churches that basically called and asked, what do you need?
Mm.
And like, we might say, we really need some sandwiches,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
something small like that. And so
Right.
like, okay, we'll be there in 30 minutes. And like, they roll up with a truckload full of sandwiches, like, and
Yes.
nothing fancy, but it was like they came in, they met the need right away.
Absolutely.
Yeah, or like kids that were separated from their folks, and like we'd say, well, kids could use something to hold on to, like a stuffy or something. And so like
Yeah.
a knitting group had put together you know stuffed animals they had knitted or sewn together,
Mm.
and or donated, collected, and they just brought them up and said, here you go, here's a bunch of stuffed animals for the kids to have something to hold on to.
Yeah.
So to
Mm.
be able to see that, and I think during tragedies, a lot of folks, you'll have folks on the ground saying, don't just bring stuff
Yeah.
because you don't know what people need. But
Right.
I like the fact that people actually called and said, what do you need? And
Yeah.
then we're responsive to that. So it was really, really great to see that.
Yeah. Yeah. I liked how you phrased it. Like you saw the direct need and were
Yeah.
involved in trying to address that. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ben, we have just about 10 minutes left in our airtime here. And so my last question also talks about, you as a person and a professional. Um, so we have some things in common. We both work obviously in fundraising. Um, I didn't know this about you, but you are also connected to APRA, the Prospect Development International Organization. So in addition to APRA, and I'd love to hear you mention some of your other extensive volunteer affiliations. And we each have 4 children.
Okay.
Mine go from, I have 2 girls that are 17 and 16, and then 2 boys that are almost 14 and almost 11. Um, so quite a few commonalities, and I'd love to get your perspective, um, you know, on what drives you to take on this deep variety of roles and balancing that with, personal and family commitments and being engaged with your family, and how do they all intersect, please?
Okay. Um, so I think one of the things that I always think about is I feel like I'm very blessed.
Mhm.
Some people might say that I am, I have privilege, but I think of it as I've been very blessed,
Yeah.
in terms of my kids, in terms of my capacity to think and do. And so what I see is that with that power or privilege comes responsibility to give back. And so
Yes.
I think that's the major thing. And for my kids to see that firsthand, me not to have to tell them, but for them to be able to see it,
Yeah.
and as an example for how they should live and practice their generosity. So
Yeah.
um it's so each of my volunteer roles and the ways I give back are tied to some skill, some knowledge, some ability, some piece of me that, I feel like is of value that I don't want to squander by
Right.
keeping it to myself.
Sure. I like that.
So so I have a few roles. I am on a lot of I do serve in a lot of volunteer roles.
Uh,
And I have a couple of rules. One is that I never serve on more than 2 boards at once.
okay.
That was not always the case, but it's been a thing here at the last, I say, decade or so, where I don't serve on more than 2 boards at once. And that's really a matter of, um, example because I encourage boards to only serve on boards for one of their top three philanthropies.
Yeah.
And so I try to encourage that. And there's some people that serve on 5, 6, 7 boards, which I think is like too much.
Sure.
And you think about the amount of time and attention it requires to be, a true fiduciary to actually do your governance duty for a board, and it's a lot.
It is, yeah.
So I try to limit it to 2, because you also have all the committee work you do associated with those,
Right.
and then the advocacy work you do on behalf of those. So right now, those 2 boards are AFP Global, so the Association of Fundraising Professionals Global, and then United Way of Kentucky.
Okay, great.
So, and the Kentucky one was the national one. It's obvious. I mean, it's not just national, but AFP is global. But that was an ability to impact my sector and my profession at a global level.
Yeah.
The United Way is ability to affect my community at a statewide level. And then the other volunteer stuff, it's like around interest areas, and so like I tried to find volunteer roles that help me develop either new skills or new perspectives or networks.
Yeah.
But are aligned with skills, abilities, insights, those sort of things. So it is a challenge to find space to allow for all those commitments.
Yes.
So I try to it's almost like you hear those people that are intentional about clutter in their home, like they won't bring something new in until they get rid of
That's
something.
Right. Yes.
I try to do the same thing. I'm not always successful, but I try before I take on something, like to get rid of some things.
Yeah,
just so I have
important.
the capacity. Yeah. And the other thing is, like, I have this, you asked about how do I balance it all or how do I do it all. And I think part of it is also like just my priority of like how do I like stack the things that I do.
Yeah.
And I'm much more focused on creating over consuming. And so I may not be the most active on social media. I'm not on Facebook. I have an account, but I'm somehow blocked. I can't get into it.
Oh.
And I'm on probably the most active is LinkedIn, but I'm really behind on LinkedIn right now.
Okay.
But I'm not really on social media to the degree that you might expect. I'm not active on, I'm not current on the latest movies or TV shows or video games.
Me neither.
So I'm much more focused on the creating over consuming. And so I'm, whether that's creating with my family or creating projects, and when I do focus on consuming, it's consuming something that helps me learn how to be better at the creating piece. So I think
that. Yeah.
So I think that's for me, that's how I'm able to do. It seems like I'm doing more things, but I'm making a decision not to consume for the sake of. It's much more intentionality around the things that I am doing.
Yeah, that is really healthy. I like that intentionality. I think it can be pretty easy in my own experience and others. You get on one board and it's like, oh, I'm on the Nedra board, and now I'm gonna go on this APRA subcommittee too, and then you end up spreading yourself, as you mentioned, just the peril of spreading oneself too thin, and how invested are you really in the volunteer work you're doing if you are on many multiple boards. So
yeah. Like recently I've had a bigger interest in advocacy work and policy work. And so I got involved with AFP's Government Relations Committee. And I've been really blessed. I've had an opportunity to go to DC and have several visits with our legislators in both chambers of Congress. And I'm helping advocate for the Charitable Act and learning a lot from the process. And it's actually helping me think about ways that I can do the same thing within my home state here. So there's things like that where, I'm intentional about, that sort of thing where, spending time on advocacy that helps me, helps the sector, but then helps me then understand how I can do more locally.
Yeah. Wow, that's a great way to connect it. Yeah. Interesting. Well, Ben, I have really enjoyed our time together, and unfortunately, I've got a hard stop in a few minutes. But you've done Kentucky well, being the first guest from that state. And before we started recording, Ben and I were talking about APRA, so I hope to see you in person at APRA PD next August in Baltimore. So that'll be fun. And thank you so much for your preparation and your time and sharing your thoughts and expertise with our audience today.
Absolutely. I appreciate the time to talk, and fundraisers don't really get to talk about themselves. So it was kind of a different experience than I'm used to, but that's fine.
Absolutely. Well, let's keep in touch. And for our audience, thank you for supporting the People in Fundraising podcast. You can find Ben's conversation in early February on LinkedIn and YouTube with the audio video. And then the audio only will be on Spotify and Podbean. And during the Christmas break, my daughter and I will be revamping the People in Fundraising website as well. So you'll find Ben's and the other 100+ guests recordings on our new website, thanks to our previous guest, Luis Diaz of the Donor Participation Project. So thank you all. Ben, great to be connected with you, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.